The first chapter of my life was in a professional boys choir. That's how I learned a lot about music, and that's what I did until my voice changed, really. But I had a tape recorder from a very young age, which I made from the choir, because we were professional. And I would record everybody's records, and I was into soul music a lot. Beatles came along when I was 13, courtesy of my sisters, I think, more than anything else. I enjoyed it. I also liked the Kinks, who were sort of a local band. And I switched over, as you might think, and I was playing jazz too, with two guys from school. In London, when I was a teenager, obviously the Marquee Club was the famous Marquee. It was cheap. They didn't have a bar, so I could go in as a 16-year-old, 15, 16-year-old. Saw all the great bands there, The Who, the Yardbirds. I saw Yes one night when there were 11 people in the audience. If you can believe it. They had Thursday night residency, and one cold, rainy night, I went down along with 10 other people. And they were mind-blowing in the early days. I mean, I listened to everything, and I played guitar in the high school band until the bass player started writing songs, and he wanted to play guitar on his own songs. And that was what got us noticed by this very, very small record company. There's a 5 CD retrospective that we've been working on all year, released in February. Well, Byzantium is the band that it's the retrospective of. But in fact, I was Byzantium's producer and sometimes engineer. But the first of the 5 CDs is the high school band, which has some of the same members, some of the same songs and demos, and you know, like they do with box sets. The tiny record company that put out the high school band record, he decided to build a studio, and he knew nothing about it. He basically just he had a bingo hall. And he instructed his 2 workmen to cut off a corner of the bingo hall and make a studio. That was about all the instructions they had. So, but he did know to buy pretty good equipment. And I was, you know, not his protege, but he'd use me for odd things, you know, running masters around London and playing piano actually on a couple of records that he made. And that was fun. So I was able to hang around in the studio, and I had about a week where I went in every night with a friend and I figured everything out. And the next week, the engineer didn't turn up for quite a big session, the orchestral instruments, and you know, people being paid money, that the session had to happen. So I just said, I think I can handle it. So I did, and there you are, I was an engineer from that day on. Slept under the piano quite often. You know, it was a one-man operation pretty much, and at the end of the session I had to clean up, beer and cigarettes mostly. And I was just too tired to go home, and I knew I had to be back in just a few hours anyway. Quite a time. I mean, I think back now, I've never worked as hard as I did then. And you know, I was 19 when I started doing that. A lot of my clients took me to other studios around London, so I became pretty well known in the studio scene. But my favorite client was Rory Gallagher. He was such a nice guy and a really great player, and he wasn't very demanding. He wanted to do live vocals and live lead guitar, and then see if there was anything else. And he got me out of the studio. He took me on several tours that we recorded. Irish Tour 74 is probably his best known album, and I was there in Cork trying to stay sober. I feel like I didn't see any summers for about 6 years, and it was nice to get out of the studio. My friends in the band Caravan lived in Canterbury, which is a beautiful part of the country, And one day I just left the studio and got straight on a train to Canterbury. Great. But then the bass playing came back into my life. You see, that was really a big change. And then I got recommended to this singer, Dana Gillespie, who had Main Man Management, which was David Bowie's management. And she said she wanted to get a live band together. And would I be the bass player and would I do the arrangements for them? It was just writing out chords, really. All of a sudden, she took us to New York. And there we were, having a fabulous time on David Bowie's coattails, spending a lot of money. His manager, Tony DeFries, had a concept where he'd spend as much of the record company money as possible, because then they'd take notice of the album and promote it and so on and so forth, which worked for David. Didn't really work for our band, but we still had a great time living it up in New York for a couple of weeks, in Philadelphia, spending David's money or RCA's money. At the end of that, I stayed in New York City until my money ran out. And I met this band who, some friends took me over there and they were rehearsing as a three-piece without a bass player. And I thought I really liked their songs and their attitude. So I sat in, as, you know, unknown British bass players would do. And it sounded like a real band. So I went home, and a few months later they said, you know, soon to tour, soon to record, we want you. And that was amazing. I pretty much packed up and left England as soon as I could, moved to New York. And indeed, they'd signed with Arista Records with Clive Davis. They had big time management, lawyers, accountants, the whole deal, agents, William Morris. And we toured around and moved to LA after about 6 months, 76 through 78. And that was one of the best experiences of my life, because we lived together, we wrote songs, we made demos in the house, which I engineered, of course. It just felt really good playing with those people. It was, you know, unfortunately the timing was wrong. They were really good, you know, we did 4-part harmonies, nice, fairly short songs with good grooves and a little bit of comedy even thrown in. In fact, we did a precursor to Saturday Night Live. It was Saturday Night with Howard Cosell. And the management was big time, and mostly did comedians, unfortunately. And that's why we moved to LA, because they had a couple of comedians who were starting to do very well, named Robin Williams, David Letterman, and Billy Crystal. So couldn't compete with that. So we moved to LA, and it was so exciting. You know, they had an office on the Paramount lot, and we got the VIP tour, and, you know, people, I don't know, saying, "Oh, you got a great future. You know, we'll figure out a show for you guys." You know, we did all the TV shows, Midnight Special, Tonight Show, Merv Griffin. So I got a real taste of the industry with that band, but as successful as their comedians were, they didn't really know what to do with us, so we fell apart. New York, Arista were really good. We got to LA and people were going, "Well, who are you guys? We don't know about you." So, and when the band split up, I had to play disco, but we won't talk about that. You know, I had no money, no car. So I took top 40 work, which, as I mentioned, was mostly disco in those days. And Rory Gallagher came to my rescue again. He was working with a producer up here called Elliot Meza, and he wasn't happy with the mixes, so he suggested that I come up and remix. And we got as far as the mastering room, and he decided to drop the whole project. But meanwhile, I had a good relationship with Elliot, and I came up and engineered a couple of albums for him. and found an apartment. And that was it. Because I'd had enough of LA for 3 years. Lived in San Francisco for the next 20 years of my life. Well, my favorite time was when I was with that band, The Movies, in New York and LA, especially when we were in New York. It just felt exciting that just around the corner something was going to happen and we're going to break. And what happened actually was punk rock came along and nobody wanted to listen to us anymore. But that was a period of my life that I wish I could go back to and, you know, rejoin it as it was.
Hello, everyone, and welcome.
Hi.
Hello, welcome, Robin.
Hi.
Thank you.
We welcome you to Shooting the Shit with Guberman and Gans. This is our first episode, hopefully the first of many. And I think David and I are both honored to have Robin as the first guest. In fact, Robin, you were the first person we thought of, just both of us. Glad it all worked out.
It's great to be here.
Well, you had the great advantage of being somebody that we both worked with and love, and who we figured would probably say yes. So I got it right the first time.
Yeah, I'm easy.
Oh, good. Aren't we all? Well, listen, man, why don't we get started? I'm always curious as to how do we end up like this? There never seems to be a real common thread. It seems to be different for everybody. But obviously, you weren't born in the U.S., or maybe you were. So why don't you start with why don't you tell us like where you're from, and you know what it was like growing up there?
Ooh, that's a difficult question. Well, I was born in London in a place called Hampstead, which is the highest part of London, and has a beautiful area called Hampstead Heath that's untouched by man or woman. It's a great place to go and get a taste of the wild right in the middle of the city. I grew up in a suburb, North London. Went to a couple of very good schools along the way, which actually didn't really teach music at all. I found a teacher who did teach music on the staff and got sort of private tuition so I could take some exams. I don't know why I needed exams, but my spare time was all taken up with this choir, the London Boys Singers, which had been founded by Benjamin Britten, who was a very prestigious British composer, and he used us for his new material. And he took us to a festival that he held every year in Aldborough. And we got really well trained. So by the time I was 12, I could sight read very well.
What kind of music was it?
Well, it was a cappella choral music.
Oh, wow.
Yes, and the choir had 4 sections. I was the leader of the second sopranos. Because I was good with holding a harmony, they liked me there.
How old were you at this point?
Well, I think I joined about 9, and I sang in it until my voice changed when I was 15.
Yeah, that's pretty common.
They actually trained us so that we could keep singing through the voice change, but that didn't really work for me. So
yeah,
when my time was up, I knew it.
Yeah, they're alternatives.
But by then I was more interested in what was going on in the London clubs that I was able to go to, and listened to a lot of jazz. And there was indeed a jazz trio within the school, one of the teachers and 2 students, and the Dave Lund Trio. It's actually there on Google. And I got a lot of experience. We played parties and small shows and played for fun every week, and small shows in the school as well. And well, what more can I say about that? Except he was very good. He took us down to a club called the Ad Lib and to see Dudley Moore Trio. And I don't know if everybody remembers that Dudley was an incredibly great keyboard player. Check it out, Scott.
Wow.
He
Not
was
know that.
Oscar Peterson style, really, really good player. And we were all blown away. All thought we were going to play jazz for the rest of our lives. However, I had also seen the Beatles and the Who and the Yardbirds and the Stones. So I was thinking, this looks like more fun than playing in a jazz trio. So we formed a rock group, three-piece rock group, you know, Cream, Jimi Hendrix, and I was the guitar player because I had a fuzz box.
So how did you go from listening to jazz? You know, when was the first time you heard rock and roll and got into that?
Well, I was happy with my classical music until I heard the Beatles, and I think it was as the short video that just showed says, I think it was my sisters that were playing it, and I went, oh, who's that? And I got into it. It was very easy. So my friends who liked to play included me because I could show them how to play these simple tunes.
How many people organize their lives around music because of the Beatles? I mean, it's got to be just vast numbers of the musicians of our rough generation, you know? I mean, think about it. So amazing.
Yeah. Different amongst younger people, of course. I think younger people learn about the Beatles and are just surprised and shocked to find that it's, you know, in a way, the beginnings of what we know as rock and roll now. Yeah. And you know, are shocked to find out that, oh, wow, this influenced so many people. I mean, to tell you the truth, I was born a little bit later. And that was kind of my discovery. I was like, how could this be the beginnings of everything? This is so amazing that it seems like, you know, this is like the last thing, you know, that this built up to this. So
you mean the Beatles?
Yeah, the Beatles. When I heard it, you know, to me it seemed like, you know, by that time it was probably the late 70s, early 80s, and I heard "Let It Be" for the first time, and to me it seemed like this is the epitome of rock and roll.
That's very interesting. Now you think, I just suddenly realized there's sort of an interesting parallel between the Grateful Dead and the Beatles in that each of them gathered together a bunch of different kinds of music and focused it really tightly, and then it exploded into something entirely new that encompassed all of that stuff. I mean, the Beatles brought together a bunch of different kinds of music, woodshedded the fuck out of it in Hamburg, right? And happened to be just amazing songwriters, and so they really just kind of launched a whole new world.
And don't forget, they had a new album about every 6 months, and that was the event to wait for.
Right.
Go straight out and buy the new album, and they push music a little bit further every time.
Now that brings up a question. Scott, did people of your generation get together and sit down and listen to records like people Robbins and my age did?
Yeah, especially when I remember being in high school, you know, and records were definitely still the rage. And even though cassettes were so popular, people really, you know, if you were really into music, you collected records. And yeah, that's what we did. We smoked weed and we listened to music, listened to records.
Because it seems like the way music is consumed is so very, very different today. That just the very idea of, like when the White Album remasters came out a couple years ago, I actually had a few listening parties. I invited friends over and we just sat and listened really carefully through the whole thing and just talked about it and stuff because it was such an important record to all of us. And I really enjoyed, I had like half a dozen of these sessions with different people. And it was so much fun to experience it through the ears of a friend, you know, and compare notes and stuff. How deeply we engaged with that music and how much magic it still has today.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the art of the record being something, it's incredible. You listen to records, Robin, or what kind of media do
Oh,
you
yes,
listen
I've got a lot of records. I listen mostly to records from choice, actually.
to? Likewise. I went through a phase where, when CDs came around, by the way, Sgt. Pepper's was my first CD that I ever got.
Oh,
And I kind of almost immediately was like, who needs these big giant records? And literally just gave them away, threw them out, moved, and just got rid of them. And now I'm in the process of replacing everything I've ever owned and more. And it's just a blast. It's great. Now I have a better system too. So to hear all those records and full detail, it's awesome.
Well, I'm very into finding the original masterings, the original issues, because there really is something special about them. The quality does decline over the years as they pressed more and more and more. I'm very fond of certain of my records that were original. David Bowie's Love. It's an incredible first pressing. It's so loud, it's so clear, it's got weird stuff on the drums.
RCA was known for using really flimsy vinyl in those days. I remember having a John Denver record that you can almost fold in half.
That's funny.
There was a vinyl shortage.
Oh, really? Oh, that's interesting.
Oh, yeah. Yes. People
in the mid-70s, part of the energy crisis, right?
Right,
yes.
Oil crisis.
Same thing that drove gasoline prices way up into the 40 cents a gallon range.
That's right. Yeah, the oil used in making records, yeah. Unfortunately.
People used to joke, those poor little vinyls are dying off.
Yeah.
In August.
You have to breathe more. Yeah.
Well, it's coming back, that's for sure.
Yeah.
You mentioned Tony DeFries, Robin, in your in the film.
Yes.
I didn't deal with him directly, but I remember interviewing John Mellencamp right when he was freeing himself from that company, and the guy that forced him to call himself Johnny Cougar. Right. He didn't want to be John Cougar anymore.
Oh.
Because that's the guy who had made him be Johnny Cougar.
Right,
Yes.
I remember that. Johnny Cougar.
Well, I bet it wasn't easy getting free.
And that thing you said about when the band moved to LA and the label didn't know anything about you there, I saw that happen during my journalism career. I saw that happen to so many artists where they'd pour their whole life into that first record, but the sales department had something else to do, like a Madonna drop that week or something, and it just fucking disappeared.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, I don't think Clive bothered going to LA very often. There was a number 2, Ben someone anyway. He used to come and visit us, and he didn't have much power. But literally, we got there and we called Arista, and they really didn't know who we were. They didn't know we had a new record out that was attached to a movie, and we fell apart. We kept going. We wrote a whole album's worth of new songs, played them to Clive at the Beverly Hills Hotel, and he rejected them, but he said, I'm going to make you do one more single. He picked a song, I think much at random, sent us in with a producer called Richie Podler, who produced Steppenwolf and Three Dog Night, little studio on Ventura Boulevard. And we made this last single, which absolutely went nowhere. But by that time, he decided to drop us and put the word out, literally. He's a powerful man. He said, I'm dropping the movies, Luke, don't touch them. So
why would he do that? Why would he drop you and blackball you?
I don't know. We had interest from Mercury and other labels, but all of a sudden they weren't interested. So we knew what had happened.
That's
I'd imagine if there's an answer to that it would be, a public relations sort of thing where, Clive doesn't. If you guys make it big, Clive doesn't want to look like the guy that dropped you.
Wow.
But who knows? I mean, that's the only.
I've heard of that stuff before happening to other people too. So,
and me as well, yeah. And I've also heard of, this has been a presumption of mine because I always do hear about how the sophomore album is so important to a group and sort of makes or breaks them. And I've always wondered and presumed if that's because the label just doesn't give a shit about you until they see what kind of success you have with the first album. And then if you do well, they'll push you to make an even better album, you know, get better producer, or put you in a better studio or whatever. I don't know.
It depends on what era you're talking about. I mean, in the 70s and 80s, there were artist development, and they made commitments to artists, and they would let them put out like 3 or 4 records, and you know what I mean? You remember, Robin, all those great acts on Warner Brothers. You know, I mean,
Warner Brothers.
Sorry,
really, yeah. I tell you, the demos we made in our house were really incredible. They still are, and there might have been 6 or 7 that were ready to record professionally and make an album. I don't think they were all fantastic, but they mostly were. And so I don't know what the deal was.
So back then, what can you do? I mean, obviously, so much has changed just recently in terms of what people could do at home in terms of recording and getting stuff together. What were you able to do for a demo at home, as you're describing? Like, what kind of equipment were you using?
Oh, nothing. We borrowed a 2-track recorder from our managers. I used elements of the PA that we had. Recorded mono to mono overdubs.
so you were both a bass.
I was a professional engineer still at that time,
Right.
as well as playing bass. So
You were both a working musician and a working recording engineer at very.
Well, I had to because we never made any money. So the first thing I did in LA was apply to a few little studios. One of them accepted me. I didn't have a car. I'll never forget taking a bus from the Valley into Hollywood. And it didn't go to Hollywood. It went to downtown LA. So then I was really lost.
How did you get to San Francisco?
No, that was LA.
No, I'm asking how you got to San Francisco.
Well, after working Top 40 for a while, I got a surprise call from Elliot Mazer, who had been doing this project with Rory Gallagher. And Rory didn't like the mixes, and Rory had suggested bringing me up. And I got there, and before I left that project, I'd found an apartment, was ready to move. I liked it so much.
You should mention in passing that Elliot died about a week before last, I think. Just a few
I hadn't heard that. Oh.
Yeah, I'm sorry to break it to you here on the air, but yeah,
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, he was a friend for a year or two, then he turned rather strange. Well, one thing he did was, while I was first in San Francisco, he took me down to Stanford Laboratory where they were developing digital sound.
Yeah.
These were the days when they had to book their half hour on the mainframe and work like hell for that half hour to try and get.
I went there with Elliot once. Were you there at when they had that very first ever all computer concert outdoors in the middle of the thing?
No,
because I believe I went there with Elliot, and
he was very involved.
Yeah. I knew later. I knew Andy Moorer, who was one of the really chief guys down there at Karma. That was an amazing scene down there. The digital reverb was developed down there, and this concert was the first performance in which everything was being played back from a computer. And as Robin was saying, not only did you have to book the time, they had to clear every disk drive in the building so they could do this performance, right? We're talking about things the size of washing machines that hold 40 megabytes on spinning drums.
So I'm a little unclear about this because I don't know anything about it. So this is some sort of a place where they're producing electronic music, the beginnings of electronic music?
CCRMA, the Center for Computer Research in Music and Acoustics. A fellow named Lauren Rush was working on digital reverb experiments at the time that I was down there. And I think the FM synthesis used by like sequential circuits and modern synthesizers. I think that also,
Yamaha being the biggest one.
Yamaha DX7,
right.
And Andy Moorer went on to work at Lucasfilm on the Sound Droid project, and they later started Sonic Solutions, which is digital audio workstation, and I'm still using a successor to that. But that you should find out about Karma, because a lot of amazing stuff came out of that lab.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that sounds so interesting. I will check that out more. Really cool. So, Robin, when what did you know about the U.S.? What did you know about L.A., San Francisco, California? Anything before you came here? I'm sure a little bit, right?
Well, let me see. I had read American novels, definitely, obviously. Steinbeck, Hemingway, Henry Miller. So I had a funny, skewed idea from different periods of time. There's a lot of information on Frank Zappa records, if you listen closely, about teenage life in LA.
Yeah.
I didn't know a whole lot about the history. I caught up on that because I read history quite a lot. I knew from my little bit of touring that there are places I liked very much: Boston, New Orleans, and San Francisco in particular. And I thought I could work towards living in one of those places, preferably San Francisco, and that's how it ended up. What did I know? I knew not to walk in Central Park in the night. Although I probably did by the end. I was very comfortable. I walked all over Manhattan carrying my bass.
Yeah.
Looking at rats this big and being amazed.
I've seen people carrying drum kits on the freaking subway around New York. You do what you got to do, right?
Yeah. People will put wheels on every instrument you could imagine in New York City. It's amazing. It's the only way to do it.
My band, The Movies, while we were playing in New York clubs, he had a cocktail kit, which is just a tom-tom with snares on the top and a kick pedal on the bottom. And we could fit everything into a taxi because there's always a piano there. And this this little amp that I played through. Preferably a checker.
I've heard of those. I don't know how familiar I am. I've heard of them. Oh, Checker Cab.
Yes.
Yeah. That I'm familiar with.
They have more room, huh?
Yes. We played, a story has just come into my head. So since this is the appropriate occasion, we got hired to play the Democratic Convention Ball in 1976 at the Statler Hilton. And we all piled into the group van, into a taxi, and got down there. And just before we got there, I realized I'd forgotten my bass. Can you believe it?
Oh.
So I had to get a taxi back to the loft, pick up my bass, and go back to the Statler Hilton. And by that time, they weren't allowing any traffic within 2 blocks of the hotel. So I grabbed my bass. I walk up to the back entrance, the stage entrance, whatever it was. And they went, no, can't come in. And I said, oh, I'm playing in one of the bands. And they said, oh, okay. So they ushered me, no ID or anything, ushered me through a little door. And I was standing next to Hubert Humphrey. It's like, how times have changed, I tell you.
Wow. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Amazing.
Anyway.
I first met you when you were playing with Vince Welnick in the Missing Man formation. Let's talk about Vince a little bit. His birthday just passed, and we played Golden Days on our show the other day, and I got to cry about it all over again. What a sweet, crazy dude he was.
Well put. Yeah, that describes it.
Yes, those two things. Yes, well, I was Missing Man 2.
Right.
And Steve Kimmick and Bobby Vega and Prairie Prince had left part 1, and they were saying, don't do it. But I would drive up from the city to Forestville, where he had a nice place, and rehearse and rehearse and rehearse. And finally, it was hard to find a guitar player. I mean, we were turning down, Harvey Mandel, and really good guitar players weren't good enough for Vince.
Really?
Eventually, we got an all singing, all playing band together, and went out and did a few cheesy gigs. They weren't very good gigs, except maybe that festival in New York. That's the vibes. It's still happening in a different location. Dog. I hear a dog.
That's my dog.
He was
trying to make an appearance.
He really was kind of crazy, poor guy, as we all know now.
Yeah, sweet soul, but yeah,
Oh,
unfortunately.
I thought you had been with him a little longer than that. It really.
Well, it was over about 2 years overall.
Okay.
I mean, we must have gone 9 months before we started playing live.
So you felt it was he just wanted to rehearse a lot. He for something to do, or was he overworking the music, or what?
I think he wanted to have a really, really tight band. He was overworking it, especially the vocal part.
Interesting.
I can tell you from my experience, you know David, I think, and I'm sure I mentioned it to you, Robin, that before I came out to the West Coast, my main touring things were I did a lot of stuff with Tom Constantin. I was lucky to do a lot of stuff with Vince Welnick when he was around as well. Oh. And I can tell you that often he and I would share a hotel room if we had to share hotel rooms, because some of them were on the, not the best of gigs. And, Vince would wake up and say, hey, there's a piano downstairs and let's try and work out these parts, even though, we both pretty much knew what we were doing. But yeah, there's a little bit of, I think after the Grateful Dead, there was a little bit of an overachieving side to him.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. I played a few gigs with him here and there, most notably down in Arizona. I got invited down, me and him got invited down to play with Extra Ticket on a little tour, Flagstaff, Tucson, and Phoenix. And this was a few years after I had produced the Persuasions record. Might as well the Persuasions sing Grateful Dead. And I had a very warm relationship with the leader of the Persuasions, Jerry Lawson, who lived in the Phoenix area. So he came to this gig in Phoenix, and Vince, of course, went nuts for Jerry and vice versa. And we just wound up having this wonderful time. Extra Ticket's a terrific Dead band. That's the Dave Hebert was their guy, I think, at that time. But playing with Vince and singing with Jerry was just fabulous. And Lawson had such a good time that he, on his own dime and of his own volition, jumped in his car and drove up to Flagstaff to play the next gig with us, and then followed us down to Tucson as well. So we wound up playing 3 gigs together, and I got to do things like sing He Will Break Your Heart with Jerry Lawson, for God's sake. I mean, it was so neat. And Vince had, he had a great pop sensibility and a real sort of showbiz kind of go for itness to him that I really liked, edged, of course, with that depression that never left him.
Yeah. One memory that I have of Vince that I think is such an awesome trait is just, he had and Phil does this too. I think they're both so great in this sense. When you do something good, they let you know, they give you that look, that smile. Mm-hmm. And Vince was kind enough to, hang out after the shows and, talk about all the great things that he heard people do on stage. And, it's just so encouraging. It's awesome.
Yeah, I feel I should say something nice about him too. We had one wonderful night in a hotel bar that had closed already, playing Roy Orbison songs till dawn.
Yeah, he loved Roy Orbison. I do know
that. He did, yes.
I think he might have been able to do something with Roy Orbison at one point, if I'm not mistaken.
He could hit those notes. Vince could hit those notes.
Oh, for sure.
Wow.
He did a cover of Roy Orbison's. I can't think of it, but it's that popular song with, that shows off Roy's huge range of vocals.
Crying.
Crying. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh yes, he did Crying.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he did it
On
once.
the other hand, he had a habit of inviting all the hotel staff to his room to get stoned.
Yes. Yes, indeed.
Suddenly it's like, how come there's no waitresses here? Oh, they're in Vince's room.
And it was always really good shit in my experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. He knew how to have fun. He knew how to be a rock star, which is cool.
Did suicide is unfathomable to me, and it's so heartbreaking that
Yes.
how many of our favorite people have succumbed to it.
Yeah. I don't want to get harp on something too negative, but Vince's suicide really taught me so much about what suicide is and what depression is. Because when I got the call that Vince had killed himself, we had a couple of dates set up for after that.
No.
So my first reaction was, "Oh shit! Why the fuck did you do this?"
Oh.
And my second reaction was, "Couldn't you just wait till the next morning? You would have felt fine." Because that's how things were with him, and that's basically, I think, how depression works. Your mind just gets off kilter, and sometimes just a good night's sleep will fix everything. So
There's lots of things about his last moments. He wouldn't let the medics touch him, and they're not allowed to.
Wow.
Tell him not to.
Oh. On a happier note, you went on to play music with Rat Dog for a long time.
Yes.
Let's talk about that. What a fun band that was.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was incredible. Yes. I'd do it again in a heartbeat.
Was that your first big, that had to be the biggest shows you were playing for your career, right?
Oh, yes. We were already big. Yes. We weren't trying to build up to being big or anything.
Right.
It was, yes.
That must have felt good to join an ongoing concern that you didn't have to build yourself from the ground up.
Yes, it was. And especially as I knew half the tunes already. Not to play, but I knew the tunes. The only thing about it is when Wasserman was in the band, he didn't sing. So they already had all the harmony parts worked out. So I didn't get to sing as much as I had in previous situations.
Why have we not put you to work singing in the times we played together? Why it didn't even register with me that you were a singer? I was reminded when I looked at the Missing Man record that you sang harmony on that, and I went, "Wait a minute, why don't we Robin sing?"
It's a forgotten skill.
Dude, next time we play, you're singing. Jesus.
Okay.
Seriously.
I've had success once or twice of sticking a microphone in front of Rob.
I'm thrilled. I really liked that time toward the end when you and Wasserman were in the band together. I really liked the way you guys you used, the roles you guys played. I thought was a really, really nice thing to do. Did you enjoy that?
Totally. Thank you for saying that. I think that was one of the most exciting things ever, playing with Wasserman and it working. And it was all just, automatic. We knew what to do and what not to do.
I've seen two other bands that had two bass players. One of them was Ornette Coleman's Double Quartet, which of course is fine. And the other was Willie Nelson and Family. And there I'm pretty sure that they had two bass players so that neither one of them had to work very hard.
Same with James Brown. They had two, but it was mostly one at a time.
But you guys, you say it was automatic. It really felt like that each of you, it might have seemed weird to the onlooker to have two bass players, but it really, you guys orchestrated it fabulously and really stayed out of each other's way.
Yes, and I have no idea how it worked, but it did.
Years is how it works, I guess.
Yes, I guess two of us had pretty good years, I think.
Well, that brings us to an interesting topic that the three of us are qualified to talk about, and that is the instinctual nature of making music and the getting your ego out of the way nature of making music and the trusting each other nature of making music and all of the stuff that characterizes the way we like to make music. I'll tell everybody that's watching that I'm a gigantic fan of Robin's playing because he does that thing that is kind of hard to find of being able to hold down the groove magnificently and participate in the musical conversation. And
Thank you.
That is the sine qua non of jam band bass playing as far as I'm concerned.
I'll agree with that, whatever that word means.
3 words. Well, thank you, David. That definitely has always been my goal, and I don't have to think very much. I've played for so long, I don't have to think very much about what's going on down here with my hands. I can just listen to the music and respond, and there's no translation time. So I'm fortunate with that.
I would imagine that your work not only as an engineer, but producing stuff would put you in that position, because isn't improvising kind of like writing a small song on the spot or whatever, constantly?
Yeah.
David Griswold calls it fast composition.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, exactly.
Engineering, I have to say, is amazing because you hear professional players every day. And I always thought not many of those English bass players were that incredible.
Yeah.
I should take that up again, I thought.
2 of the very best of them came over here. We got you and Pete Sears in the Bay Area.
Well, thank you. It was wonderful. And another improviser.
Yeah.
Mm.
So in the timeline of things, you're singing at first. At some point, you start playing bass. At some point, you start engineering. At some point, you go back to bass, right? Is there any other instrument in there at all?
Well, yes, I played guitar and piano from a very young age. There was always a piano in the living room. My father was a good pianist, played only by ear, and pretty much that's how I played too. I tried lessons, and the teacher wouldn't teach me because I would just copy what she played and not read the music. And I had a couple of classical guitar lessons because I really wanted to play classical guitar. And the teacher moved after just a few weeks, but she sold me her guitar. So I was stuck with a really nice guitar and inspiration to learn classical guitar. And that's why I have rather strange fingering on my bass. People always look at my hands and say, "What are you doing?"
And guitar?
Classical guitar fingering on the right hand.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
And that's all before the bass.
That's all before the bass, yes.
And so at what point did you decide, I think bass is going to be my main instrument?
When I discovered that the school stand-up bass had the same tuning as a guitar, but down an octave, I thought, oh, well, that's something I can do.
Huh.
And I didn't own a bass till I was about 16 because, again, as it said in the pre-show video, I was the guitar player in the band until the bass player started writing tunes, and he wanted to play guitar on his own tunes, so switcheroo, and that was it.
Frank Zappa said that 90% of bass players got the job in a band meeting in high school in a garage when there was 3 guitar players and one of them had to become a bass player.
That's right.
It's always nicer to meet bass players who became bass players for more wholesome reasons than, drawing the short straw.
Well, I was thinking the same thing, right? Yeah, it's true. I think most people's stories who are bassists are, bassists because nobody else was playing it or whatever, or they knew how to play it because they played guitar and they needed a bassist. Even Phil, they said we need a bass, but he was a trumpet player. So
yeah, right.
It's a common story. So yeah, it is very interesting to hear people who were just, they heard the instrument or saw the instrument and, were inspired to just, make it their instrument. I think that's cool.
However, in the 90s, when I was in between everything, really, I got into the Golden Oldies circuit, the Drifters, the Coasters, Sam and Dave, everybody who was doing the circuit, Mary Wilson, who just died. There's a Del Shannon. There were so many people I couldn't, Peter Noon.
You toured those acts?
I could hardly begin to name all the people I played with in that period. And at one point, the guitar player left, and they couldn't find a guitar player who could read music. So I said, well, I can read music, and I can sort of play guitar. So I got that gig for a while, which was Billy Preston. I did, dozens and dozens of gigs playing guitar with Billy.
It's amazing.
And then around here, you played with the Stupheads, which is a related endeavor. Talk about that, because some of my favorite musicians were involved with that. Joshua Brody.
Yes, well, Josh was head stupid.
Yeah.
It was Josh's idea of what was stupid, and sometimes it was just because it was repetitive, or stupid words like some people are made of plastic, kind of stuff. And then he'd have tunes that stopped in the middle, things like that. And that was a fun gig.
Yeah, it sounds it.
But the repertoire was all cheesy pop tunes, right? From different.
Mostly, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
But the musicianship level is very, very high among those people. It's not, nobody's fucking around here. They know what they're doing with that stuff. Joshua's done some amazing things. I heard a medley of James Bond themes on KPFA one night that turned out to be one of Joshua's productions. It was mind-blowing.
Yes. He also does this thing where he plays just the bridges from Beatles tunes.
That's funny. That's funny, and I bet very
funny.
Those of you who are watching this who live in the Bay Area, it's hard to find it now, but he's still doing them during COVID. But look for the Beatles thingy that Joshua does, where he and at least one other musician will set up in a bar, and you can go sing a Beatles song with them. I've done it a couple times. It's really fun. It's like a Beatles karaoke run by a really great musician. Beatles thingy.
Beatles thingy, yeah.
Yes.
That's the correct terminology. Speaking of which, for those of you who don't know what a bridge is, it's usually the middle section of a song that's straight away from the rest of it. Music jargon.
For some reason in England they call it the middle eight.
Yeah.
Well, that's common here too. You hear that a lot.
It's almost easier to describe the bridge by naming a few songs that don't have one, like Althea and Franklin's Tower and Fire on the Mountain.
Yeah.
None of them have a bridge.
Right.
The bridge is like a musical digression, and then you go back to the original theme.
Yeah. As you know, I do my best at writing songs, and when you hear a song like Fire on the Mountain, you say, geez, that's, you can do that stuff. You could do a 2 or 3 chord song and no bridge. Why did I work so hard at this song?
They do get away with that a lot, don't they?
Oh yeah. Now, when your band was coming up with these songs, Robin, writing music for the first and second album, that was done as a group?
Well, I didn't join until they already had the first album pretty much done.
Okay.
But yes, definitely there were 2 main guys, like John and Paul, who were pretty competitive about how many great songs they could write in the quickest time. But they always wanted some input from, both the drummer and myself. And there are a few tunes that I'm very proud to say I actually co-wrote with the main guy.
Cool.
Scott and I wrote a song together. I crave collaboration, but it's really hard to do. And finding people you can collaborate with successfully and comfortably is a real find. So we got together one day almost exactly 2 years ago, and I walked in there with one line of words and music, and we walked out of there 3 hours later with a whole song, and then we went in the studio with you and Greg Anton to record it.
Yes, I was going to say, who played bass on that, David?
Don't forget. In fact, I know you have played bass on a couple of productions that you forgot about.
That's actually true. They turn up sometimes too on compilation box sets and things.
If everybody, we should mention it before we move on, that the song we're talking about is The Town That Still Believes in Magic, and you can get it on Bandcamp. Go to dgans.bandcamp.com, and it's one of the options there. The Town That Still Believes in Magic, and we recorded a really nice jam in the middle of it too, so it's an extended song.
Which,
and Rose put the wrong album up on the screen, but it'll get you to the right place.
There you go. There you go.
No, that ain't it either. Although that one's too.
I think we should say what a great job Rose has been doing.
It's
preparing. Unbelievable.
Yeah, we're all jamming, friends, and having a great time.
And you can also notice what I'm drinking.
Yeah, that's fabulous.
Wait, that way. There
Yeah,
you
I know it's confusing. Well, how about your parents? Did they play any instruments? Did that have like an influence on you growing up, or did they listen to a lot of music?
go. My parents were actors before I was born, and my father kept at it a little bit longer. He played piano very well. He couldn't really read music, but he could write it, which is kind of how I was for a while myself. There's a tradition in England called the pantomime, which is mostly at Christmas, really silly sketches, nothing to do with Marcel Marceau. It's not mime. It's pantomime, and you normally get a famous comedian playing the lead, and there's silly songs. And my grandfather used to write those, and my father would write the music for them.
Wow.
Up to about when I was 6 or 7, I remember him staying up all night to write this score for a pantomime. I still have the program for it, actually.
How cool that you had a role model of composing in your house. I mean,
That is super cool.
my grandmother was a musician, but my house, they shoved a clarinet in my hands when I was in grade school and stuff, but there wasn't much encouragement of playing or writing. I started writing of my own accord when I was 15 years old, and I haven't stopped since. But it's great that your parents were not just playing, but composing. That's very cool.
Well, my mother was just, she liked to listen to the radio.
Yeah. You get along well? Did you get along well with your parents growing up?
Yes, very well. Yes, wonderfully. My mother's still with us. Talk to her twice a week.
And she's in the U.S. too, right?
No, she's in England.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she's living in a. It's not really a care facility, but she does have a red button she can hit if necessary, and she gets things delivered to her door at the moment. She can't really leave. They're in lockdown, heavy lockdown over there. But yeah, and as long as my father actually had to get a real job, so he only played for pleasure after a while. He played very well, mostly Broadway musicals.
But that was his passion, huh? That's really great.
Yeah.
My parents listened to Broadway stuff when I was a kid. I grew up on Kiss Me Kate and Fair Lady and stuff
My
like that.
Fair Lady was a big favorite, yes.
Yeah, some of those songs. Lovely. Wouldn't it be lovely?
I saw, when I was about 6 or 7, I saw My Fair Lady with Rex Harrison and Julie Andrews.
Wow. On stage? Wow.
Probably my first iconic show that I saw.
Wow.
I also saw Jimi Hendrix at the Marquee. I also saw Bob Dylan at the Albert Hall. I had a few iconic shows in my youth.
I grew up listening to or hearing classical music, which is my dad was heavily into classical music, collected records, and always had an incredible stereo system and everything. That as soon as he'd go away, I'd crank up my rock and roll on. But at the same time, my mother, who really didn't listen to anything in the house, only listened in the car, would just put like a pop radio station on. So that was my balance of music. I was just always so interested in hearing the songs that were coming on the radio as opposed to what my dad was listening to. So I think that somehow steered me in the rock and roll direction eventually.
My older brother, 2 years older than me, went back east in the summer of 1961 when he was 9 and I was 7. And when he came back, he visited with our older cousin there. When he came back, he got into the radio. We started listening to Top 40 radio.
Mm-hmm.
They made rock and rollers out of us, but it was just before the Beatles. It was when there was stuff like the Four Freshmen and Patti Page and the Dovells and Chubby Checker. It was all mixed up together on the radio in those days.
Yeah.
It was a different kind of a lot of different kinds of music came into my head that way because my brother went to New York.
Likewise. Well, I started when I had a little clock radio in my bedroom, and one of the only stations that I could get in was an AM station, WNBC, with Imus in the morning. And back in that day, when I was a kid, it was literally everything. You'd hear, Beatles and just more poppy stuff. I mean, it literally was just everything, disco, so just whatever was popular. And AM radio, it's hard to imagine now. There's just like no music on AM radio. So
I made myself a little crystal set from a kit.
Uh-huh.
I listened to him after bedtime on a single-sided headphone, which was great. But there wasn't much good music on the BB in those days.
Was pirate radio happening at that time?
Not really. Well, it happened
later, huh?
A little bit later than that. When I was already a teenager before that started up.
You built this radio?
What's that?
Is that what you said? You built this radio?
No, I asked if pirate radio was happening.
Oh, I know. I thought Robin said that he put together a crystal.
Well, it's a crystal set. It has like 4 parts.
Huh.
And,
oh yeah, I remember those. I built one that didn't work.
Yes. But I did want to say that every Friday night when I'm around, there's a very small local station that called Duke and Bonner, and they play that exact mix of tunes that David just described, all the oldies and some corny, some amazing, doo-wop and beyond.
Yeah.
So it's 3 hours of they specialize in playing records that weren't hits. So it's really a fun show to listen to.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. The opposite of what I was listening to.
Well, I had classical when I was a kid.
Yeah, my parents listened to opera and stuff like that when I was little. Actually, some of the first music that I really got into was classical music. There was a record called the Moldau, this orchestral piece that was all about a river, right? And it was the kind of thing like, it just sort of gave me the idea of music as a metaphor. And I really liked playing in the orchestra and playing like a Bach fugue and things like that I played in the orchestra. I like being exposed to all the different kinds of music to listen to and even to play a little bit, and I think it really helped me develop a wider range, as a composer myself, being more open to different kind of ideas. And the more you hear, I think, the wider your ears become, the better you'll be at comprehending what you need to do in real time, right?
One of my main relaxing things is still playing piano. I work through Bach. You see how good it sounds?
Yeah.
I went in the studio apartment and had an upright piano. I could literally sit on the couch and put my feet up on the piano, which was on the opposite wall. It was this tiny little apartment. And I didn't even fucking play the piano, but somebody gave it to me, so I had it for years. Basically,
Great.
Inert piece of furniture. How weird.
So both you guys, obviously, kind of influenced by something other than rock and roll before you discovered rock and roll. And
Yes.
I think in Robin's case, it included jazz and classical. David, you just talked about classical being an influence on you. And I think what I hear as a younger person, what I hear a lot from older people who, were around before rock and roll was really popular and then became popular is
not old.
Older. That, people had this sort of attitude that, and especially because of the beginnings of rock and roll, I understand where this came from, that, I'm going to go into rock and roll because it's a good way to make money compared to this jazz stuff I'm doing, or it's more fun. It's not as serious. And I think there was that general attitude that, like, okay, I grew up learning this rigid format of music, and now here's something that's maybe like lower brow or less artistic in a way, but I'm going to embrace it for the fun of it. And Do you guys feel that way? Because I personally, from where I'm coming from, I view rock and roll just as much as an art as classical or jazz might be.
Of course it is. Speaking for myself, quickly, Robin, before I hand it over to you, I played music as a kid as part of my cultural enrichment, and I grew up in the LA City schools and stuff, but it didn't become a calling until I wrote a song.
Yeah.
And when I was 15, and my older brother had a guitar, and he put some chords to some of my teenage poetry and taught it to me, and I was off and running. And then it became a calling. It never before that, it wasn't. I had no thoughts about music except as something that I did. Right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It never occurred to me that it would be my life until that moment, and then I thought of nothing else.
Right.
I also never felt like. Because the first things I ever did were my own songs, I think I always was following that path and gathering the other stuff along the way rather than entering a world of music that had any definitions, right? I made it up as I went along and learned it as I went along because I was driven to by writing songs. Anyway, over to you, Robin.
Well, I was just going to say, with the scarcity of gigs these days, when I actually get to play with other people, it's I feel like, oh, I'm not going insane after all. It's keeping me sane. Scott and I just did one recently. That was didn't that feel good, Scott?
Oh, so good.
That day
Still
with
high.
yeah, but I don't know. It's very important to me, and it's been missing, and sadly missing.
Well, I play solo every day here at home, and I miss playing with other musicians.
That's it.
Scott and I played on my front lawn a couple times last year, and it's getting close to the time when we can start thinking about doing that again.
Yeah, just
playing a gig in a room seems pretty far off for me. I hope you guys were doing it outdoors.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I haven't done anything indoors since this whole crazy thing started.
No.
Well, the few things I've done have been outdoors.
I did a Sweetwater get out the vote thing with Mark Karen, but it was an empty Sweetwater. That was spooky too.
Right, I remember seeing something
there. Nobody in the kitchen.
It's been really interesting watching people learn how to do this, and I feel like because I've been in radio for 35 years, I kind of have a leg up on some of my musician friends because I'm used to talking to imaginary audiences already. Right, like so. Playing music to an imagined audience is less of a stretch for me because I already talk to invisible people.
Yeah,
but I miss playing in a room with people. God damn it!
I know, I do too. But there still is something like magical about doing these live streams. I know, I feel like there's I feel some sort of connection between whoever's watching, even if they're not chatting. I feel some sort of connection between whoever may be watching.
I'm not saying that it doesn't offer any of that. It does for me. I mean, obviously and hugely. I've got a group of people that come every day, and we talk in email all freaking day long and stuff. A real community has sprung up around my daily feed. And although I don't interact with them during the show, I interact with them before and after, and they're very much a part of the show. It feels great to me to be doing it, and utterly apart from the fact that I desperately miss playing with other people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear that.
I get it. Robin, what do you think you would do if you weren't a bassist? What would you be doing? If you weren't a musician, music was off the chart, what would you be doing?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Actually.
What about you, Scott?
Well, I'd probably go back to engineering, but I'm really an analog engineer.
Yeah.
I sort of like playing music in a way anyway, as you said. I really don't know. Some people encourage me to write. They say, you write really well, you should write something. And,
I asked you that because, and to answer your question, David, that I've been asked that before, and I also have no answer. It's like, I have no idea, the pressure is so great. But one thing that I came up with that I thought might be a suitable substitute for what I do. For some reason, I could never play music, not being in the music industry at all. Maybe a truck driver. I love the traveling aspect of music. I love to see, other portions of the country, and I love to be with friends and just, traveling, you're doing nothing. You have no responsibilities. So yeah, I love to shoot the shit and do this kind of stuff. So I think that's what I would do. And I'd have to bring a couple of friends with me in my truck.
That would be fun. I have a very boring answer to that. I did some work as a graphic designer when I was a kid. My parents were both graphic artists, and so I learned how to do paste up and stuff. So I did some of that, and I was a proofreader and shit like that when I was younger. So I probably would have wandered into that world and maybe become a magazine journalist anyway. But I did all those things on the way to being a musician because they enriched my musical life. But I haven't had to choose. I've gotten to earn my living doing music-related things for 40-plus years now.
Well, but David, you are an author, and you are a DJ. You're covered.
Yeah, you've done it all.
You do a lot of things really well.
Why, thank you. Hey, we should mention, do we have any gigs coming up or anything? We're running out of time here. We got 3.5 minutes left, basically.
Whoa, this went fast, huh?
It sure did.
I could mention the box set that I just received.
Yeah, please do. Tell us all about it.
There was a band in my high school that I took into my studio on a Sunday afternoon, recorded some demos. And we got them a deal with A&M Records and Warner's in the States to do, series of albums. We only got up to 2 albums, which we made in Trident Studios, which was a wonderful experience, the whole thing. Mm-hmm. Roy Thomas Baker was still the engineer at that point. Cherry Red Records has assembled a 5 CD set, including my high school band as the first CD, because we had a record on a cheapo label, the 2 professional CDs, and then one that I produced entirely from live tapes and another demo session, and then a last CD just of live tapes. But anyway, 5 CDs. The band is called Byzantium, and it's just come out on Cherry Red Records. I can't tell you much more than that.
I want to hear this, Rob. I got to hear this. That sounds like a lot of fun. Cherry Red Records?
Yes. It's available through Amazon.
Amazon? Cool.
Yes, Amazon US.
Rose has a copy.
She's holding it. There it is, yes.
Hey, everybody, that's Rose. She runs this show here. Thank you, Rose. This has been really, really fun.
Thank you, Rose.
Great thing.
And thank you, Robin.
Oh, well, thank you. It's been really fun. Can't hear you, Rose.
We can't hear you, Rose.
Reading your lips.
You hear me? My mic was off. I'm sorry. Tech person who needs help with tech. Thank you, Robin. Thank you, guys, all of you. This has been so awesome and fun. I really appreciate it. And everybody who's out there in TV land or whatever land we call this in this era, streaming land. All right, I'm getting out because I'm not part of it.
All right. Thanks again, Rose.
Thanks for holding up the record, though.
Yes,
that's great. Is that your? Are you on other records? Are there other? Did you play any of those Rory Gallagher records?
No, unfortunately. We spent a lot of time together, just the 2 of us, doing overdubs and mixing and things, and we jammed. He told me once, you'll never know how close you got to being asked to play keyboards with us. I said, but coming from Rory, it might have been partly an exaggeration. But,
would you have done it?
We did. Well, we jammed quite a lot, guitar and piano. And then sometimes I'd play his guitar, his iconic guitar. And he'd fool around. And I don't know.
You would have happily taken the job as a keyboardist for him, huh?
Yeah, well, I nearly joined Wishbone Ash's keyboard player at one point.
I remember you saying that's amazing.
Side career as keyboard player, but I would have had to, do some woodshedding to really. Well, Rory's stuff I could have done. That's just the blues, really.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, it's been great having you, Robin. And Scott,
Thank you.
I think we got something here that might have some potential.
Yes, I agree with you, David. This is fun. I hope everyone
Thank
else.
you all for joining us here on Stream Stock. And I suspect we'll be announcing another one of these fairly soon as we can line up another victim.
By the way,
Yeah.
all the three of us need is a drummer, you know.
That's correct.
You're right. Let's work on that.
Remember that.
I can't wait till the next time the three of us are able to play together with any drummer we can think of. I really miss playing with both of you.
Me too.
Likewise.
Cool.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Goodbye, all.
Bye.
How does this end, Rose?
There's an after show thing, isn't there?
Oh, yeah, she puts on a thing, right?
Yeah.
We just have to stare at the screen until it goes.
All right.
I've been warped by the rain, driven by the snow. Yes, I'm drunk and dirty, and don't you know that I'm still out on the road late at night. I see my pretty Alice in every headlight. Oh, Alice, Dallas, Alice. And I've been from Tucson to Tucumcari, Tehachapi to Tonopah, driven every kind of rig that's ever been made, driven the back road so I wouldn't get wet. And if you give me white and wine, and you show me a sign, I'll be willing to keep moving. I've been kicked by the wind, robbed by the sleet. Had my head stoved in, but I'm still on my feet, and I'm still. Oh yeah, I'm still. And I've smuggled some smokes and folks from Mexico. I get baked by the sun every time I go to Mexico. But I'm still. And I've been from Tucson to Tucumcari, Tehachapi to Tonopah, doing every kind of rig that's ever been made. Driven the back roads, so wouldn't you play? And if you give me weed, white and wine, and you show me the sign, I'll be willing to keep moving. I'm willing to keep moving. Play the intro at the end.
Soprano sax.
And this, of course, is Scott Guberman on the keyboards and the vocals.
Happy holidays. We have one more for you. See you tomorrow.
What was the last one?
Sunshine, and my tunes were played on the harp unstrung. Would you hear my voice come through the music? Would you hold it near as it were your own? It's a hand-me-down. The thoughts are broken. Perhaps they're better left unsung. I don't know. Don't really care. There be songs to fill the air. Ripple in still water, where there is no pebble toss, no wind to blow. Reach out your hand. If your cup be empty, if your cup is full, may it be again. Let it be known there is a fountain that was not made by the hands of man. There is a road, no simple highway between the
angels to guide you. If I knew the way, I would take you home. La da da da. La da 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 da. La da da. Thank you very much, Berkeley. We'll see you tomorrow.
And I want to thank all of you for being out here this weekend. What a wonderful time it's been. Weather's been terrific for the most part. Vibes have been great. So many fine musicians all speaking the same language in their own way.
Let's go.
sun will shine in my back door someday. March winds will blow all my troubles away. And I wish I was a headlight on a northbound train. I wish I was a headlight on a northbound train. I'd shine my light through the cool Colorado rain. I know you're right, gonna miss me when I'm gone, gone, gone. I know you're right, gonna miss me when I'm gone, gone, gone. Gonna miss your baby from rolling in your arms.
That's the first time I've ever seen David do that. Get up and just sing, no guitar, no nothing like that.
I